Committee will come to order. The gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank all of the witnesses for speaking with us today. And I know several of you had to travel here, and thank you for taking the effort to share your stories with us. They're truly heartbreaking. I want to extend my condolences to the witnesses who have lost family members to criminal activity. I'm an attorney, I've been a champion against violence against women, and have tried to work to do everything that I can in all communities, but also in immigrant communities, to make sure that we stop the scourge of violence against women. And I stand with my colleagues for any way that we can do bipartisan work in this area. I also want to point out, I'm from North Carolina, so we're not a border state. And we've had incidences of illegal immigrants who have killed not just innocent victims, but also members of law enforcement. We're celebrating the anniversary of that, in that tragedy in my district right now. Immigration doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's a result of a lot of forces that push people from their native countries and pull them to ours. And perhaps one of the greatest forces is our American labor market. And I appreciate the comments of Mr. Boudreau, understanding that there are labor issues in this country that bring people here and that opportunity. And our economy relies on foreign workers and to fill some jobs, particularly in times of low unemployment. And that is one of the times that we're having right now. And migrants, the ones who don't perpetrate these horrible crimes, take a lot of risks traveling to the United States to seek a better life because they know their labor's needed. And employers in my own district are begging for legal pathways that have the kinds of background checks and review that I know you're asking for. And this is particularly in the agricultural area, as we've discussed, and also in construction. And I am 100% for checking everybody out when they come to the border. However, excessive criminalization of immigration inhibits labor flow, and to only focus on that side keeps us from being able to do the kinds of background checks that we need to do. And what's happened that we've seen, particularly in the agriculture community, is that seasonal workers in decades past who could come temporarily now feel like they have to stay the entire time in order to do the work that they want to do because they don't have that free flow back and forth. And the criminalization of immigration and the increasingly limited legal channels to come to the United States, particularly for seasonal jobs, has led to a growth in criminal enterprises, and we've discussed that. And we absolutely must crack down on those criminal enterprises. Those criminal enterprises result in human trafficking, drug trafficking, trafficking in firearms. They hurt the immigrants, they hurt our citizens, and they hurt the fabric of our communities. So I agree with my colleagues who have said that comprehensive immigration reform would address all of these issues, the issues at the border, the issues with trafficking, and then the issues in our labor force. And if we could create more legal pathways and ways to create an incentive to check people's backgrounds before they come to the United States. Legal pathways would also ensure that migrants coming to work in the U.S. are completely vetted before they're able to integrate into our communities, and would allow their skills and labor to fill the needs that we have and hopefully reduce crime in the future. My first question is for Ms. Lopez, and I only have 15 seconds. To the extent that you're able, can you comment on the typical employment prospects of many migrants, and would you describe the contributions that they make to the local communities they settle?
Sure. I can tell you that the biggest impediment for them is obtaining work authorization. Currently, there are significant backlogs in the processing of those applications. However, the majority of them, when they do find, are able to obtain work authorization, they do tend to work in lower income fields. Typically, agriculture is a very common example. We have a lot of people, not very many of the immigrants actually stay in El Paso. The vast majority leave El Paso, and we see them settle in North Carolina, South Carolina, other places where there's agricultural work. And then we also see a lot of people who have advanced degrees and then are able to get those recognized in the United States and continue on with their being a doctor or a nurse or that type of work as well.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me the extra time.
My home state colleague yields back. I recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here today, and I was able to hear each one of your presentations. I know it's a long and kind of gut-wrenching day to be here, so thank you very much for that. Mr. Biggs and Mr. Issa and myself were just in the San Diego sector Thursday, and I had been there before, and one of the facilities that they want members of Congress to be able to see is where the Ninth Circuit keeps all of the evidence from the cases that are pending before that court. And they call it the vault, and it's just mind-boggling when you're in there because there is so much fentanyl that is being smuggled across the border, and specifically in the San Diego sector, 60% they're estimating, not my numbers, this is what DOJ is saying, 60% of all the fentanyl is coming through that San Diego sector. So I wanted to kind of focus on that and kind of respond to some stuff that was said earlier about there's no real legislation kind of that brings us here today. But Ms. Fundner, your son Weston, and unfortunately, you know, I know it's difficult for law enforcement to kind of track down. I just wanted to ask you, was there any success in finding out where your son ended up getting the fentanyl that ultimately took his life?
Yeah, they know where he got it, and they know who gave it to him, and it's on camera, and it's on text, and the case was dismissed. So
in the other cases in my state in Wisconsin where there are parents that find themselves in the same situation that you do, that's been part of it. So the trafficking and how it makes its way across the states. So let me just kind of bring that back together again, because 66% of those deaths involving synthetic opioids, the fentanyl stuff, is not permanently designated as a Schedule I narcotic. And this is something that is just still unbelievable to me, that we passed in the House last year a bill that would permanently designate that. I think this could make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, it's become a partisan vote as well, which makes no sense. So if I could turn to the sheriff. Sheriff, can you just give me kind of an overview of how Schedule I is viewed? And do you think that would make a significant difference in the way law enforcement is able to handle fentanyl as it continues to pour across the border?
Well, the drugs listed under Schedule I obviously are the most egregious and dangerous to the human body without strict regulation from physicians and or those who would be able to oversee Schedule I type drugs, for one. When you talk about how, if I can touch into the fentanyl coming into our country, obviously China is working with the cartels, and that's how it's coming in, stamped in Mexico and then freely coming across this Biden-Harris open and unsecured border into our country. In my county alone, and up and down California, we had over 150,000 fentanyl pills in a traffic stop where 2 illegal immigrants were released under California law, where they were off into the wind and never to be seen again. And I tell that story because it's not uncommon to law enforcement all up and down California and across the country. And that's how this fentanyl, this dangerous fentanyl, is getting into the United States. But having said that, under a Schedule I, I think it would give far more federal regulation and/or a sting in the bite into prosecution and those being held accountable for jail time. I think it would send a very strong message to hold people accountable for the dangerous, deadly fentanyl that is impacting American citizens.
Thank you very much. And Chairman, I would just like to reiterate again, what we're hearing at the border, when we talk to the Border Patrol, oftentimes they're saying that it's the trafficking, it's the smuggling of the narcotics across the border that absolutely is linked to every other aspect of those that are coming across illegally. So if this is certainly the basis of a lot of the organized crime that's actually being utilized right now to make all this happen. So I think we bring the bill back, we focus on this, we pass it through committee and get it back on the floor of the House, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like, Sheriff, I was looking a little bit at your bio. You're native of California and spent, almost 40 years as a sheriff. So you have a very long history and perspective, and and how it changed California and what's really happened at the border. What do you believe from your perspective, you look at it historically and where we are right now, what things have worked? Obviously, we have no border security. We have completely broken immigration system where if you're here illegally, you get a lot of benefits and your judgment proof and a lot of welfare as it is very becoming problematic to really support our own citizens. But if you want to try to do something legal, it's almost impossible becoming to immigrate to our country with a long line and really very unreasonable and I would say very stupid immigration policy. But from the border security perspective, what have you seen work, what haven't worked? You work under a variety of administrations, Republicans, Democrats. What could you share with us that you think is important and where we are right now and what you think that an urgent needs that Congress needs to address?
Yes, and quite frankly, I don't feel that it's all that complicated. I feel that it's pretty reasonable. That we have a strong and secure border, that we're able to vet those who are coming and going, that we provide the opportunity for people to come into this country through the legal system in which we have had for years. There's laws in place that just need to be adhered to and obeyed. We find that the drug activity and transportation and trafficking of drugs, guns, human beings across the border is less. Will it completely eliminate it? No. That's just part of crime and criminal activity. But we will have a controllable handle on it if we enforce the laws that are currently in place, and that we get rid of the most egregious and felonious people causing harm to American citizens, holding them accountable. If you're bringing fentanyl into this country and people die, you need to be held accountable. If you're bringing human beings into this country and you are using them for a sex trade or gaining making money through criminal means by trafficking humans, you must be held accountable. I believe there should be federal laws that if you are trafficking young children for the purposes of sex trafficking or any other means, or any other human being for that matter, that there should be a federal law that you are held in federal prison for whatever determinate amount of time that is, so that a message is sent very clearly to those who are doing that. If you hold people accountable, if you enforce the laws that are in place, you will see a drastic reduction in the amount of people killed by fentanyl, the amount of cartels that are involved in coming across the border into our country, and you will actually have immigrants that are here, living peacefully, working in this country with the idea of chasing the American dream. I do not think it's complicated.
Thank you. I agree with you. And unfortunately, we haven't seen it, and especially in the recent years. But if you would look at some things, what Congress is doing or doing, because really the most important power we have is power of the purse, right? We set up policies, we give direction, executive branch should follow these directions, and funding is the way for us to, to actually hold the other branch accountable. And we haven't been doing our job very well, not just very well, it's terrible. I always say the only good thing that makes me optimistic that Congress has about 12% approval rating, so American people can see it. There is some hope. But from some of the things, what do you think are the most important things if we look at the fund? And maybe someday Congress will have a funding discussion. We haven't had it for a while. We just do CRs and presentations. What do you think, the most important things? Because we've heard some very tragic stories, the real consequences, real life affected, because of negligence and disregard of duty by executive branch. And what do you think things that Congress should maybe take a looking at the funding and other things that we try to force the other branch actually enforcing the laws?
I believe that law enforcement across this country should be supported, and the idea of defunding the police is one of the most ridiculous things that I've ever heard in my 38 years of law enforcement. We must support law enforcement at every level. Now, what that means is on the border, we need to spend money to make sure that we have a strong and secure border. But if you're asking me my opinion, and I'm only law enforcement, but common sense is something that I pride myself in. And I would argue that if infrastructure was put in place, that you had enough people along the border in regards to the judicial process, providing as many judges as you can, as well as possibly an incarceration facility to hold people in custody if they're coming across the border outside the means of the legal system. But you have enough resources at the border that you can actually keep it from becoming this funnel that everyone is so worried about and not being able to get into this country. But I think if you use the purse strings to help support resources along the border with infrastructure as well as people, I think that we would eliminate some of the issues that we, quite frankly, are facing in this country right now.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Generally yields back. Sheriff Boudreaux, I want to say Tulare County must be very proud of you. You've, in two quick 2-minute speeches, you've about distilled this area more effectively than maybe anybody I've ever heard. I understand that you have a flight to catch and need to leave the committee within 5 minutes, so you're dismissed to leave at your discretion. Thank you, sir, for being here. And with that, I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, including the sheriff, but to Ms. Funder, Ms. Moran, Ms. Nungare, and Ms. Nobles. I've listened to your testimony, and our hearts are with you. It is a difficult task to discuss the loss of your children, and this committee appreciates your presence and recognizes how difficult it truly is. And as to Ms. Nungare, as the father of twin 12-year-old daughters, and my heart was especially touched by your testimony. Thank you. This Biden-Harris administration's failed immigration policy, the border crisis created by this administration, continues to harm communities across not just the southern border, but across the country. And having traveled to the border 3 different times, twice to Texas, once to Yuma, Arizona, we not only got to see the impact that it had on those communities, but how every community is impacted. We talked to farmers whose crops were invaded by illegals who were camping in the fields in Yuma. And if anybody's been to a convenience store in the middle of winter and turned over a ready-made salad and looked at the bottom, it says made in Yuma. So not only are you dealing with food supply issues, food price issues, but also farmer costs. And then we went to a hospital and saw a NICU, and the NICU directors talked about how many of their NICU beds are filled with migrants because it is a dangerous journey. Women are assaulted on the trip up, and they are often pregnant by the time they arrive at the border. They don't have prenatal care. They are often delivering prematurely and have to take up those NICU beds. If you are a citizen of the United States and you're in Yuma, Arizona, and you need a NICU bed, you're traveling to Phoenix, several hours away. Talking about the education system and the need for ESL teachers and the impact on the tax rates and the transportation and the housing costs. I mean, this is a humanitarian crisis, but also a crisis at the border, and it's also a crisis across the country in communities like mine, which is thousands of miles away in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But having been a prosecutor, I worked with a county who had an ICE agreement so that when illegals were arrested for committing crimes, they were tried, they were jailed, but the day they got out of jail, they didn't go walk the streets of Harrisonburg. They went and were taken by ICE to the airport, and they were sent back. And to any of you who would like to answer, why should everyday Americans care about the border crisis, even if they are thousands of miles away from the southwest border in places like Virginia? Ms. Aguirre?
I can tell you that all the people sitting here today didn't choose this path. Tragedy struck them without choice. Alexis had no idea that was going to be the last day she was going to have her daughter, alongside these other mothers. So whether or not you want to take notice of what's going on at the border, it might come knocking at your front door. Mr. Gonzalez, when he left to work that day, had no idea that was going to be the last moment he saw his daughter alive. The next time he was going to see her was at the medical examiner's office identifying her body. Right. So whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, the criminal element of the immigration population do not care. Yeah. They are going to afflict their criminal ways on our communities regardless. And not even mentioning any of the financial things that you just mentioned, which are important. My primary focus is the preservation of life, right? And quality of life. And I am just besides myself that we prioritize giving a complete stranger who has never contributed to our society a chance at the likelihood that they may or may not harm a U.S. citizen. Yeah. Or in my case, a little girl who's also a migrant.
And all you have to do, if you're in any part of the country and have a relationship with your law enforcement officers, go talk to them. Because as Sheriff Boudreaux said, even my sheriffs in rural Virginia can tell you when they pull over an unmarked van on the interstate highway and find sex trafficking, human trafficking, minors being abused, that is happening right in our backyard. And so we have a responsibility to protect the citizens of our districts, just as we do to ensure that you can be protected in your homes as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I thank the witnesses again. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Wyoming, Ms. Hagan.
Thank you. There's a couple of statements that I'd like to make, and then I would like to give you an opportunity to make a statement about why you're here and give voice to the victims that you are representing here so beautifully. First of all, the Senate bill is not a border hardening bill, as you have pointed out. In fact, it would allow a minimum of 5,000 illegals to cross the border every single day without any enforcement whatsoever. I come from the state of Wyoming, and under the bill that has been proposed by the Senate, every 2 weeks we would have a minimum of 70,000 people crossing the border. That's more than the entire population of the largest city in the state of Wyoming. So I agree with you, that is not a border security bill. There's also been a comment made that we're not here talking about any particular bill, but that's not actually true. In fact, this week I am leading a bipartisan coalition of House members to introduce what's called the Fight Illicit Pill Presses Act. A bill which requires serial numbers for pill presses and prescribes penalties for tampering with pill presses. These pill presses are one of the methods by which traffickers are disguising lethal doses of fentanyl to look like other pills, and this bill will help law enforcement better track and punish those responsible for distributing these pills into the country. So we are working at trying to find a solution. You know, I have listened to your stories today. I have watched your body language. I have watched as you have engaged with various members of this committee. And I think what I'd really like to do is give you the opportunity with each one of you who have suffered these terrible tragedies because of the crimes of illegal aliens. I'd like to give you just a few minutes to describe your family member and what is the message that you would give to the Biden, Harris, and Mayorkas administration. Ms. Nungaray, I'm going to start with you.
Well, my daughter was definitely her own personality. She wasn't like any other child. She was spunky, quirky, was an amazing friend, I've had the pleasure of hugging so many of them because they just miss her so much. She had a love for animals. Her dream was to save every stray animal and take care of them. She didn't want any animals to be left out in the streets without a home. She was a kid, a preteen, a few months shy of being a teenager, doing what teenagers do. We've all been there, and I wasn't expecting to wake up and not find my daughter, and I really wasn't expecting to not find her and to realize she was never going to come home again.
She won't be forgotten.
Thank you.
She won't be forgotten.
We need better security. We need to make sure we are looking into who we're letting in. They were both reprehended and released the same exact days for both of them. And the last one was not even 3 weeks, and it took my daughter's life. They took my daughter's life, and because of these policies we have in place, the pain and the trauma is irreversible. So now I'm here to advocate for her, and as much as I am not a public speaker, I am standing strong and facing my fears for Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Marin.
Thank you. Rachel was tiny little girl. She was probably 5 feet. She always said 5'2", but we knew she was 5 feet. She was feisty. She was like a little spitfire. She was actually born with orange hair, very red, but she didn't like her red hair too much, so she always bleached it blonde. She was very active. She loved her children. She had a very bad stammering problem, and as a child, she was bullied a lot because of her speech. And so I told her a story when she was a little girl, and I said, you know that there was another person that was very famous, and he had a stammering problem. And I told her the story of Moses, and I told her that God gives special people special gifts because it makes them stronger. So she looked at it not as an impediment or pediment, as a handicap. She looked at it as that was her strength. And so she went out of her way to be outgoing and to choose jobs like a hostess at a restaurant where she put herself in the public way to speak. She ended up making so many friends. I think when we had the walk, there was over 2,000 people that came out for her walk the first time. She also was very compassionate and kind towards others because she knew what it was like to be bullied. And so she accepted people for the way they were. And I'm here today to speak about her, but also to speak about all the women that are attacked but aren't killed. Because I've done some speaking, I have a lot of ladies that come up to me in the areas that I've traveled, and they'll tell me that where they've been attacked, and someone will come up from behind them and try to put them in a, chokehold, and they will fight to get away. And one person in particular said that she was able to get away from this particular man, went to the police to report it, and it turned out that the man had attacked 7 other women.
Oh, my.
But nobody hears these stories because there's not a dead person, or maybe the crime hasn't been fully committed. And so there are still crimes that are going on far larger than we expect that are being unreported. And so I really want Rachel's life to make a difference. And I really want and hope that you take into consideration what we're saying, because we want to save lives. And it's not about politics. It's not about if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat. It's about being American, protecting our families. And the only way we're going to do that and have this really be a land of opportunity for both the American citizen and for the immigrant that wants to come in is to do it legally and to have people vetted before they come into our country. We should be protecting ourselves.
time of the gentlelady's expired, but we'll let Ms. Funder and Ms. Nobles give a quick response, if you could, to the gentlelady's question, and then we have 2 more members to question.
The Biden-Harris administration is doing nothing, and there's the fentanyl problem is such an issue. It's pouring over our borders. It's killing more people in America, more young people in America than any other ailment in this country. And it's killing children. And it is, you know, it is nothing's being done about it. And there's no excuse or no reason why we're not doing something. 300,000 Americans have died on our soil. I've said it so many times. And it's a war on our soil, and nothing is being done. Why aren't we securing the borders? Why aren't we going after the cartels? Why aren't we telling China, like, shut down your factories, this is not okay? Why isn't fentanyl, aside from Schedule I, it's a weapon of mass destruction. The things that could be done with fentanyl is, it's insanity that they will not shut the borders down. It's killing our children, and it's killing more children and more people in this country than anything else right now. It is an epidemic, and it needs to be dealt with, and there's no excuse why they haven't done anything.
Ms. Nobles, if you could briefly give a brief response, that'd be.
I believe that the Biden-Harris administration is responsible. Kayla's murderer came over as a UAC, unoccupied alien child, saying that he was scared of gang activity in his country, knowing that he was an MS-13 gang member.
Mm-hmm.
Kayla was a very loving, happy girl. She loved the home. She wanted to help the homeless. She loved animals. She worked so hard to become independent with having autism. She could live on her own. I made sure she could live on her own. I would never have let her live on her own if I knew she couldn't do it. She worked so hard to overcome all the obstacles in her life, and this monster just ripped her life out. After all that hard work, her life is just snuffed out just like that. I'm sorry. Their voices are being heard. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I believe we just have 4 more. We'll go with Mr. Van Drew, Mr. Nels, Mr. Hunt, and Mr. Ruley. And then, again, I apologize for the long day and the breakup, but we'll go as quickly as we can here. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To our witnesses here today, I am sorry for your pain. I can't say that I know what it feels like as a father and now a grandfather. I don't. Nobody will ever know. People shouldn't even say that in my mind. I am sorry, though. And there's no words I can say, but the worst of all of this is it didn't have to be this way. You know, I hear crocodile tears. I hear people, they should rot in hell, they should this and that. But we can fix this, and it should have been fixed, and it wasn't this way. Names like Lakin, Weston, Rachel, Kayla, human souls, human beings that were raped, that were murdered, that were disfigured, that were tortured and thrown away like garbage. And this is because, and I'm going to say it, of the Harris-Biden failure. And everybody can say what they want to over there, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And I'm sad to say this because I don't want to be mean. I do not want to be partisan, but I'm simply telling you the truth. The truth is, tens of thousands of Americans are being killed by fentanyl, and you know it. I don't have to repeat all the testimony that you all gave. And that drug flows freely through our borders. The truth is, in Aurora, Colorado, gangs of Venezuelans are taking over apartment buildings and extorting rent from people. Think how scared those people are. They're having to pay them money so that they can live safely in their own home. The truth is, in Ohio, Haitian migrants are beheading the ducks in public parks, and yes, it's weird. It is weird, but we didn't bring that weirdness here. We didn't bring that distorted behavior here, but it's forced on a small town in Ohio when 30,000 illegals have been pushed upon them by the federal government. The truth is that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden let these people in. You all remember when the administration changed and they had T-shirts on at the other side of the border, Kamala Harris T-shirts and Joe Biden T-shirts. There was a reason for that. It is tell the truth time for a change. Who rescinded the executive orders? The executive orders that Donald Trump had put in that were there to protect us. Who wouldn't finish the wall? Who wouldn't keep the Remain in Mexico policy? Who instituted catch and release into our country? Who let Title 42 lapse with no replacement at all? Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. When you do wrong, you have to own up to it and be blamed. And when our party, and I hope you look at old videos from the past, because this is not the only hearing we've had. We've had these hearings all across the country. When we brought these concerns up, the left laughed at us. And they said they were fabricating stories and that we were being political. This is the end result of what they did. I pray to God, and I mean this, I pray every single day, and I'm not giving you a political speech. I pray to God that Americans see and know this truth. They trusted our government. They trusted them to protect us from foreign threats. Their trust was shattered and it was destroyed by that administration. Our witnesses today, your stories, that's the truth. It's the ugly, horrible, sinful truth. The truth is this administration knowingly, purposefully, methodically destroyed our protection at the southern border. That is the truth. They may not like it now. It's an election year. So now we care about the border. That's a lot of bull. I'm telling you the truth. Month after month, we watched year after year as millions of illegal immigrants poured into this country. We watched as tens of thousands of pounds of fentanyl poured into this country, killing our youth, killing our most vulnerable, good kids that made sometimes just one mistake. And we watched as terrorists come into our country. We've got hundreds of terrorists in our country. We don't know where the hell they are, what they're doing, and what they're gonna do. And you know what we watched? Kamala Harris and Joe Biden do absolutely nothing and welcome it. Worse than all, they encouraged it. They've created this evil, and it is evil in our country. Not all undocumented are evil, but the process is evil and wrong, and it allows evil to come in. And you know what? When they asked her, and we all remember, it's on video. It's not hard to find. They asked her about it. What did she do? Do you remember? She laughed. She laughed. She said she hadn't been in Europe. She hadn't been at the border. She didn't give a damn. It was a joke. It was funny. It isn't funny. Your lives will never be the same. That's not funny. And over here, we know that we're really better and safer in the country because of illegals, and we're even told that they are better and safer than our own Americans, that our own Americans commit more crimes. And they've even said it today in this hearing room. You heard it. So I'm going to bring you real quick questions. Ms. Funder, is that fentanyl-laced pill hadn't been smuggled across our border, would your son still be here today, yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Moran, if the man who murdered your daughter had been stopped at the border, would your daughter still be here today, yes or no?
Yes.
Ms. Nobles, would your daughter be here today if an MS-13 gang member with a history of murder was stopped at our border and sent back to where he came from, yes or no?
Yes.
God help us. We must be strong. We can't save these shattered lives. But if we want to do something in their name, that next bill that we finally get through and pass when we have a new president should be named for all of you. And their lives will still have meaning, and your lives have meaning. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well said by my friend here, Mr. Van Drew. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here, taking the time. To the witnesses that have lost a child at the hands of this crisis. As a father of three, I can't fathom what you're going through, and I'm truly sorry for your loss. Ms. Nungary, I introduced the House version of the Justice for Jocelyn Act, which I thank your family. You helped write it. You helped write it. I want to thank you for that, to honor the memory of your daughter and make sure preventable deaths of American citizens at the hands of illegal aliens never happens again. It doesn't have to happen. And thank you again for your family's help and on that. And again, my apologies spend a minute and share with the committee how important it is that, that this bill, this Justice for Jocelyn Act, that it gets passed.
I believe it's super important for it to get passed because we don't know who we're allowing in this country. And the fact there were hundreds of beds they could have had them in, there was no reason to do the catch and release. What we have going on, there was no reason for it. They should have stayed apprehended until their immigration court hearing.
That's right.
It's not right, it's not fair. It took an innocent child from a future. She was supposed to be part of the future for the next generation.
Well, I can assure this, you have my commitment. I think you have the commitment of the chairman and this entire Judiciary Committee that we're going to move on this. I think it's the right thing to do. It's very, very important. Unfortunately, there are countless other victims out there in the Kamala border crisis that didn't get an opportunity. They didn't get an opportunity to tell us their story in this committee today, and our witnesses are far from alone in their suffering. Ms. Fundrick is not alone in the loss of her son from the fentanyl. We've talked about the fentanyl and how it's poisoning our people. #1 cause of death for Americans 18 to 45. In 2021, more than 1,500 children died from fentanyl poisoning. In 2023, fentanyl deaths, over 100,000. And it could all be prevented. It could all be prevented. And fentanyl is just one part of the story. There are many other victims. The countless businesses been victimized by mass retail theft committed by gangs. Rural areas near the border who fear for their families as illegals trespass on their property. New York police officers being beaten by these mobs of illegal aliens. People who themselves or other family members assaulted, been robbed, killed by an illegal alien, including those by drunk driving, happened when I was the sheriff of Fort Bend County. Before I came up here, I had illegals. And the knucklehead, after we caught him, we find out he was deported 6 previous times. How the hell do you get deported 6 previous times? Because you just got back and forth, easy peasy for him. Hard to look at a guy, look at the family of Miss Boo, who was killed by this illegal, and say, I'm sorry, but this guy shouldn't be here. Unacceptable. Reports of the armed Venezuelan gangs of illegals taking over entire communities. I think you touched upon it, Colorado, that trend, Nicaragua. And what's frustrating about that is this, is the Border Patrol back in September 2022, they knew, they were alerted, hey, look out for these bad hombres coming out of Venezuela. Because what do we know? Back in 2015, Trump was right. I can remember when he said it. They're not going to send us their best or their brightest, right? And then Trump is all of a sudden labeled as this racist because he said such. He goes, they're going to send murderers, rapists. He's right. He's right. He's right all the time, quite honestly. He's certainly right here. So I send a letter to Mayorkas in September 2022 expressing my concerns about what we're hearing from the Border Patrol. What kind of response do you think I got from him? Nothing. I hear nothing. Then we go into February 24 with Laken Riley, that wonderful, beautiful nursing student, murdered by, again, another Venezuelan, right? Sent a letter to Mayorkas, and what do you think I get? What do I get back? Nothing. He just doesn't want to talk about it. He avoids it. Then we go to June of 2024, Jocelyn, Hungary. Again, 2 Venezuelans. Nicolas Maduro's not a dummy. He's not. He sends all the worst people up here because he knows it's going to cause chaos for our country. So he embeds them, he sends them into our country, and this is what we get. Venezuela's, their inflation is over 222%. Their poverty rate is at 50%. Why wouldn't he want them back? We can't find out what kind of people these are when they enter our southern border. We don't have a relationship with Venezuela to find out what kind of people these are. But I'll guarantee it, Kamala Harris, you're responsible for this. Do you know what her position was in the border real quick? And then I'm going to finish. Her campaign positions, pledge to end my immigrant detention. I'm going to taxpayer fund gender care. I'm going to decrease the funding of ICE, and I'm going to end ICE detainers. The American people are smarter than this, and if we're going to save our country, let's bring Donald Trump back. The American people are smart enough, and we're going to save our country and secure a border on November 5th. Donald Trump will do it for all of us because he puts America first. He puts you first and your families. God bless you all.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Oh, Mr.
No,
Chair.
I'm sorry. We've been joined by the lady from Vermont. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I come here as a new member of Congress, was a teacher prior to that. I have 2 teenagers myself. And I know that there is nothing that matters more to us as moms, as our kids, nothing. And so I want to start there because I know there is absolutely nothing that any of us can say to alleviate the suffering that you have been through and continue to endure with the loss of a child. Prior to coming into the committee today, I was in a hearing on the online dangers that girls and teenagers face. I have committed my life to work on the mental health crisis, the crisis of loneliness in this country, especially among teens and young people. I'm concerned about gun violence prevention. I'm concerned about solving real problems. And what's been so hard for me being on this committee is I come from my state legislature where people do sit down across the aisle. And they sit down and they solve problems together. And it's been very frustrating for me when I know coming in here that this problem, this terrible problem of broken immigration, of dangers at the border, predates this Congress, predates this president. We can go back decades. This is a can that has been kicked over and over again. Now, again, there's no comfort in that for any of you. But I think what Americans need to be demanding of all of us, I don't care what party you are, what they should be demanding of all of us are real answers to these problems. Because nobody should have to bury their child because they've experienced violence. Nobody should. And so I guess I want to make a plea, honestly. We don't know who's going to be president come January. We don't know who's going to be in charge of this chamber, whether it's going to continue to be the Republicans or be the Democrats. We don't know. What we do know is that we, as members of Congress, should be working every single moment of every single day in our committees to actually get work done together. The American people deserve better from all of us. And I think what pains me the most as a parent who just sent my kids off to school again in the last 2 weeks is spending so much time worrying about the gun violence that they experience in schools. And I hear from parents all over my district that they're worried about the safety of their kids. And again, whether it is the violence at the border, whether it is a broken immigration system, whether it's gun violence prevention, I wish that we could stop the grandstanding and actually sit and do work together. That's why we're sent here. We are not sent here to serve any person running for president. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. That is not what we're here for, to talk about your guy or your gal that you want to see in that office. The American people deserve better from all of us. My family deserves better from all of us. And again, there is nothing that I can say to you who have lost your children other than to say, we need to do better. And I make my commitment to you to do my part, to work across the aisle, to stop demonizing each other, to stop demonizing Americans. And I also come to this hearing as the child of an immigrant who came here for a better life. And I never imagined that I would be in the halls of Congress as the child of an immigrant. And so I am holding many stories here as I sit here, and I'm just very deeply, deeply sorry for your loss. And I will do everything that I can in my job to make sure it doesn't happen again. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes Mr. Hunt of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we have family members of victims who were murdered by illegal aliens who should not have been in this country in the first place. I want to start by saying to the victims' mothers, Ms. Nangare, Ms. Morin, Ms. Nobles, and Ms. Funder, how sad I am for your loss, and I genuinely mean that from the bottom of my heart. It takes so much courage for you to stand before us today, sit before us today. It's been a very long day, and for us to hear your testimony and for us to hear your stories, it really warms my heart, and I know that there's bravery left in this country, and you represent that, you embody that. Ms. Nungary, I am a fellow Houstonian, and I want to especially thank you for being here. Your tragedy hit very close home to me. Your testimony is heartbreaking, and 2 illegal aliens walked across the border thanks to the Biden-Harris administration's open border policies. Within months of being in this country, they took the life of your young daughter, Jocelyn, which is ridiculous, and I'm a co-sponsor, and I'm also strong supportive of the swift passage of the Justice for Jocelyn Act so that no child or parent will ever have to experience this tragedy again and sit before us in this hearing room again. Thank you for being here. Question for you as well, ma'am, if you're open to it. I would like to give you the opportunity to tell us anything that you have not mentioned in your testimony about your beautiful daughter, Jocelyn.
I didn't want to press what she was. She was a child. I believe all of us as adolescents have done things our parents wouldn't recommend to do. We didn't always all listen to our parents, and a lot of kids just want to have fun, and a lot of these children really do believe that they're invincible, and they don't know the harms that they have and that are right in front of them in this world, and a lot of them are being preyed on. And my daughter really should have felt safe to, even if it was late at night, which she had no business doing, we know, but she should have been able to walk a couple minutes from our home and be able to safely get home without having to be lured somewhere by being the helpful little girl she was just trying to help them get to wherever it was they were going, and they took advantage of her.
Thank you. Again, this touches home to me because I have 2 daughters, Olivia and Victoria. If some of this happened to them, I actually don't know what I would do. Actually, I have an idea, and I probably wouldn't be in Congress anymore. So I understand your frustration, and you're right. Our children should be able to walk these streets safely, no matter what hour, no matter what decisions that they make. The left keeps saying that statistically Americans commit more crimes than non-Americans in this country. Well, I'd like my colleagues on the left to know that these mothers that are dealing with this understand that that's actually not true. And in fact, police sources told the New York Post that around 75% of people arrested in Midtown Manhattan, which is not necessarily a direct border state, in recent months, they've been illegal aliens. The federal government must do everything it can to protect American citizens. That's actually our sole purpose. That's our #1 job. And we can do that. It's simple. We need to reestablish the immigration and border policies that worked under President Trump. This is not difficult. My colleagues on the left want to say this is not political and it doesn't matter who your guy or gal is. Yes, it does. It really does, actually. And because if President Trump were in office right now, we wouldn't be sitting here. And I don't care what political affiliation that you have. Those are facts. Kamala Harris wants you to confuse her border policies now because now she's claiming that she supports Trump's border policies, and she wants you to believe that she's tough on the border. But we know that's not true. And as we know, that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. There's been a lot of talk today about policies. House Republicans in May of last year passed H.R. 2, the Secure the Border Act. House Republicans have done our part to attempt to prevent these tragedies from occurring and happening again. But the Democrat-led Senate didn't even take up the bill. If you think things are bad right now, if Kamala Harris, our borders are, is back in office after November the 5th, we will continue to have these hearings. We are doing this to elucidate the American people, to let them know that we have got to stop this from happening in this country, and we have the ability to do just that. I'll end with this. I have 18 seconds left, and I want to tell you, I could see your faces right now. Ma'am, this picture in front of me has really touched my heart. I took a picture of it, and I will show it to my children. And I will show it to those people in Houston, Texas to prevent this from happening again. I can see the pain on your face. As a father, I understand exactly how you feel. As a combat veteran, and tomorrow was 9/11, as a combat veteran that went to war after 9/11, I fought for this country to keep these animals from killing our young children. I will continue to fight tirelessly to do just that. Thank you so much. Thank you for your bravery. God bless you all. And we are trying our best to prevent these tragedies from ever happening again. Thank you so much for being here.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this hearing today, and thank you, ladies, for being here. When I was in the South Carolina legislature, chaired an opioid task force that was our state's response to the opioid epidemic. And at the beginning of every hearing we did, you get into the policy, right? You get into the weeds of where you are and how do you get out of this. But we always started and ended every hearing with the faces and voices of those who are going through this themselves. And so it's incredibly brave for you to be here. Really appreciate you sharing these stories. I know it's not easy to do so, but thank you. Ms. Nungary, your daughter Jocelyn was murdered by Venezuelan nationals who entered the country illegally, and they were released into the country with notices to appear in front of an immigration court. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And one of them had an ICE ankle monitor when he murdered your daughter. This to me is just like incredibly unfathomable that we're allowing these individuals into this country. What does it say about the policies of the Biden-Harris administration? Are there border policies or lack thereof working for the American people?
There's a huge lack for public safety for us U.S. citizens. We should be able to feel safe throughout all cities of the United States, and it is a very, very broken, failed system. And I'm very appalled to be in this country because of how failed it is, especially after losing my daughter. We should be safe, and that shouldn't be a question, that shouldn't be a privilege, that should be a requirement. As a U.S. citizen, we should be safe at all times.
No, I completely agree with you. And unfortunately, there are so many that are similarly situated to you and all of you that are going through this. Ms. Nobles, I want to turn to you. The illegal alien who murdered your daughter was an unaccompanied minor when he entered the United States. Once he committed murder, local police were able to determine that he was actually in a gang, MS-13, and had a criminal record in El Salvador. Can you tell us what happened when Martinez became custody of Child Protective Services after he murdered your daughter?
The Aberdeen Police Department asked CPS to put him in a secure location because of the crimes that he was, being what he did. And they agreed to put him in a secure location. When they went to go arrest him, they found out that it was a group home, and he was in a group home with other children. And the local police said, "Oh, this is secure." They did not know, CPS did not let the Aberdeen Police Department know that they moved him from the group home to a foster home and enrolled him in high school.
And what types of freedoms did he have after he did this? You said he was enrolled in high school, which is...
He was put in high school with 1,400 other students, knowing that he was in a premeditated first-degree murder case, rape and assault.
Exposed to all these other individuals.
All these other individuals, and it makes me so angry that they put other children at risk.
If Kamala Harris were here right in this committee hearing today, she was sitting here on the House side, what questions would you have of her?
Well, actually, I would say, well, you can have Walter come live with you, because Kayla was murdered in her own bed. She was sleeping, and she had to wake up to this monster breaking into her room and strangling her with her own phone cord. She can have him.
But she won't.
Of course she don't want them in her house, but she's all for him, and it's not a joke. I would tell her, this is not a joke. You're laughing. These are real people, real children who had lives and was taken from them in the worst way.
Thank you for that. Ms. Moore, I want to turn to you. In your testimony, you talked about how the Border Patrol let a man with an open Interpol warrant for murder enter our country. Do you feel safe under the broader policies of the Biden-Harris administration?
Mr. Fry, Mr. Morton stepped away.
Stepped away. Well, any of you, do you feel safe under the Biden-Harris
No,
policies?
they chose to give people that have never contributed to our country the possibility of a better life while making the lives of the citizens worse, while risking public safety. They gambled because it's not their lives to gamble with. They have their private security. They have bulletproof car vehicles. They live in gated communities. What about everybody else that has to live with these individuals in their communities? And going back to the case of Maria Gonzalez, her neighbor was one of those individuals that was brought here. He was an unaccompanied minor, and ironically, since he left his town in Guatemala, the murders of little girls stopped.
You know, it's remarkable to me, and I was listening in my office or listening to the commentary on the other side. I'm happy to work on securing the border. But every time that we have come forward with a bill or a policy initiative to do that, that you actually secure the border, that you stop the flow of people who don't know why they're in the country, that we stop the criminals from coming into the country, they don't engage. They shut down debate. They say we're engaged in conspiracy theories. In fact, you know what's so strange? The first hearing, one of the first hearings that I was ever in this room, the ranking member said that we were imagining a border crisis. That is insanity. Y'all are living this every single day, and there are millions of people who are in your shoes. Thank you for your bravery today. Thank you for being here. And we will be praying for you and with you and continuing to push this and make sure that we can secure our borders. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Ruley.
So I spent 6 years in the Ohio Senate, and I'm only in my 3rd month in Congress. So I've seen a lot of testimony over the last 6.5 years. This is the first time I was nervous, being in front of all the mothers. And my days are long. I have a lot of different things, hats I wear in my life. And I came home a couple months ago, and I watched a lot of news, and I saw Jocelyn's picture. Just completely broke down. Anyone that has a daughter, there's no way you could get around that. And I started thinking about what kind of questions I could ask the moms. And like, I'm drawing a blank, and so like my cousin died young, my best friend got killed. So I got like a lot of their moms together so they could help each other and have like it's like a coffee group, and they get together and then they talk. And then I was thinking about the ultimate mom, Mary, and how her son was sacrificed, and she had to watch that, and she had to carry on. And you guys are gonna carry on. And you're here, and you are empowering yourself. You have to say this story over and over and over again. And I can't imagine how you wake up in the morning and you don't have her, or your kids, you don't have them with you, and how you go on. All my grandparents were born overseas, and then we celebrated going through Ellis Island. My one grandma, Giannetti, she got stuck in Ellis Island for like a year because there was medical things, and we vetted everybody, and then we assimilated. We're a country of immigrants. We're not anti-immigrant, but we don't know who's here. And you guys are the biggest stories of them all. You know, in Ohio, I know handfuls of people that have been killed in drunk driving that are from illegal aliens that are driving these vehicles and shouldn't be there. I really encourage all of you to continue this venture and don't stop. I mean, and it's easy for me to say, but no matter how bad it hurts, you have to keep telling the story, because people in everyday life, it's just a little blurb of your stories, and it's coming to a theater near them. In Springfield right now, you've heard in Ohio, there's tens of thousands of Haitians that are there. There's a little boy, 11 years old, killed by one of them. I'm not going into all this stories about all the other different cultural things. I'm just talking about bare bones here, and this is Ohio. So I just want to take a second, and I know a couple of the moms are from Maryland. And so when I heard that, like Maryland, and being in Ohio and living our lives, when you hear the border crisis, you think it's Texas or you think it's Arizona. You don't think Maryland, you don't think Ohio, you don't think Vermont, you don't think Massachusetts, you don't think Minnesota, you think Texas. But Maryland, Maryland It's like as far away from the border as you can get. And so it just with the moment for the moms that are from Maryland, there's no way you could have ever thought that in your neck of the woods that your kids wouldn't have been safe. And here we are. We have to vet these people. So if the moms from Maryland could just say a word or two.
I didn't think I would be living the journey that I am. I thought Kayla would be safe in her own home. And it's just, it could happen to anyone. It could happen to anyone, anywhere. And you don't have to be close to the border to have this affect you. We picked out a pretty white dress for Kayla for her viewing. She couldn't even wear it. She had to wear a granny dress to be covered from her chin down because of the bruise, because she was covered in bruises and her neck and all that was messed up from the cord. So this could happen to anyone.
Well, I can't thank you enough. And if you can continue the journey, the public needs to know this isn't Democrat or Republican. This is just America. And we could do better. And your kids didn't die in vain. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Once again, I want to thank you all for being here and telling your story. Apologize once again for the breaks and they just want to, in some ways, a typical day on Capitol Hill, but we do appreciate your valuable testimony that I think a lot of Americans are going to take to heart. So with that, our committee is, the committee stand, wait, I need to do one other thing. And this concludes today's hearing. We thank our witnesses for appearing. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. Without objection,